Hey guys, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. It's that time of the year again. Version 4 presented yet another major shift in the game's meta, specifically in the carry department. Not only that, but Fontaine featured several characters with game-changing abilities, literally. They alter some units' entire gameplay. Granted, not all of these changes make their way to the top, but it goes on to show you how innovative this year has been for the roster. Throughout all of version 3, the meta revolved around reactions. Hyper Bloom, Quicken, Electrocharge, Swirl, Freeze, Vaporize, Overload, etc. Dendro was a welcome addition to the game, a major help for players who lacked the wherewithal to get characters for every situation. The side effect of this, however, was that hypercarry teams whose DPS hinges on the frontrunner's own strength suffered from their inability to compete with the sheer amount of damage offered by reactions. Version 4 sought to equalize things a bit, and they most certainly have. So let's find out what changed in the past year. Today I bring you the updated top 5 strongest DPS units in Genshin Impact. As per usual with any top 5 or top 10, I'm going to attempt to be as objective as possible. Be that as it may, my thought process may differ from yours, as in the attributes of a damage dealer may be evaluated differently between me and you. This is not a conclusive nor exhaustive list, and under no circumstances should this be received as a be-all end-all. Naturally, just because you don't see your favorite character mentioned here does not mean they're bad or not worth the investment. Genshin's difficulty ceiling is laughably abysmal. You can easily full clear Spiral Abyss with like 80% of the cast. That being said, opportunity cost demands consideration, especially for those who are trying to optimize their gameplay. Finally, my choices for this list will be under the assumption that you have or are able to obtain all the necessary teammates, equipment, and whatnot to realize the character's full strength. Therefore, a character's paywall will not be factored against them unless it is substantially higher. Just a moment though, I want to give a shout out to this video's sponsor. How many Black Clover fans out there? Well, Black Clover Mobile Rise of the Wizard King is hosting its half anniversary celebration. To commemorate, they're giving away up to 100 free pulls and 999 reroll chances, essentially as many as you need by completing a few quests. Black Clover Mobile is a turn-based RPG based on the anime series itself that came out not too long ago, as evident by the half anniversary. You can build a team of units straight from the anime, which, as you know, Black Clover has hundreds of them, all from the various houses and families, so rest assured this game will not run out of new characters anytime soon. You can rank up all of them regardless of grade, meaning even underwhelming units can be useful to an extent, and there's plenty of content to throw them into, from your main storyline to raids, boss rushes, PvP arenas, and time-limited challenges. The game is fully voice acted by the original Black Clover seiyus, making it a very faithful rendition of the franchise.
What's this jerk's problem?
Little more detail regarding the half anniversary, there's a new SSR coming out alongside chapter 12 of the main storyline, Spirit Dive Yuno, and in addition, Asta Black is making a return. He was available a while back and is getting a rerun, being one of the best power characters in the game by far. There's a lot happening over the next couple of weeks on Black Clover M, so if you're interested in checking it out, use my QR code or link on screen, which is also in the description down below. Thanks again to Garena for sponsoring the video, but for now, let's get back into it. And like always, this will not be ordered. Opening up with the newest addition to the game, the beloved Arlecchino. In spite of the Pyro element's overabundance of on-field attackers, Arlecchino stands out as arguably the best Pyro DPS in the game. Yes, I'm going on record in saying the Harbinger is indeed more powerful than Hu Tao, albeit by a razor-thin margin. Much of what made Hu Tao the best Pyro DPS was not through her own strength. Instead, she was simply the best, or should I say frankly only option for a half-decent melee attacker. Pyro has no shortage of attackers, that much is true, but virtually all of them consist of bow, catalyst, and claymore uses. Bennett is the sole Pyro sword user in the game, believe it or not, while your choices for Pyro damage dealers for polearms are Xiangling and Hu Tao, of which the former has no reason to be used on field. This made Hu Tao the most compatible choice for Hydra's two main follow-up attackers Yelan and Xingqiu, and a great choice with other supports like Farina for her glass cannon playstyle or Xianyun for plunges. Arlecchino was the first on-field non-claymore melee attacker to be released in 3 years. There is no other way to describe her. She does damage, so much damage. Trading any semblance of survivability, she bets it all on killing her opponents before they can kill her. The keystone factor lending to her faculty is her permanent uptime, having continuous pyro infusion. All you need to get her going is a Bond of Life, which, despite her skill having a long cooldown, comes with both a refund and refresh. With her normal attacks dealing bonus damage based on how much Bond of Life she has, naturally this makes her lean more in front-loaded damage, as her DPS is at its strongest at the beginning of her rotation. One other quality of life privilege given to Arlecchino is that her strength persists even upon switching out, whereas doing so on other on-fielders might come at the expense of losing their buff, disrupting her combo entirely. And while her damage is technically prone to fluctuation considering it's based on her Bond of Life, which continuously depletes itself, she's a rather consistent unit, capable of handling herself well in any combat scenario, though she's definitely at her best when fighting groups of enemies in light of having more access to Bond of Life and fairly solid area coverage for a lance user. Thanks to this, she can even play competently in overload teams as Chevreuse alongside your standard Vaporize parties. The main downside to her is that in exchange for some of, if not the highest damage we've ever seen, Arlecchino is by far the most challenging to play in a survival sense. Her inability to restore health outside of her ultimate makes her even more vulnerable than Hun Tao, who notoriously intentionally puts herself at low HP to gain more damage. You can always circumvent this with Zhongli or another shield user, which most people do, but to really access her full potential, it takes a party of all damage dealers, otherwise her strength doesn't go that much further than Hun Tao. You can alleviate Arlecchino's margin for error with her signature weapon and first and second constellations though. Altogether, she's one of the best, but also one of the riskiest damage dealers in the game. However, such danger comes with an incredible payoff once you do get the hang of her. Continuing on with our list, we have another version 4 unit, and his inclusion should not come as a surprise to anyone. Neuvillette. I swear you guys must be sick of hearing me glaze this guy, but there's a reason for that. Never has there been a character so egregiously overpowered before, much less a main damage dealer. I'm always of the school of thought that DPS units are never top tier since they're ultimately only as good as the supports that pair up with them. Neuvillette would be one of only 2 exceptions to that. Unless you're fighting a flora of hydro-immune enemies, the easiest choice for every Spiral Abyss Chamber and floor, every Trounce domain, yes even the Narwhal, every boss, every domain, is him. This guy's everything. Staggering consistent damage output with 3 hydro pumps per rotation. Hands down the best unassisted area coverage of any on-fielder thanks to your ability to move and spin while shooting. Self-sustainability with the source water droplets that also instantly load his hydro pumps. He doesn't care about who's on his party as long as they can stack his A1 passive. It's funny, the Hydro was already the strongest in the game owing to how ubiquitous the element is on a supportive level, but it wasn't really known for being the star of the show, only the backstage crew. Then they went and released the Hydro Sovereign, and now Hydro has the best supports in the game and the best on-field damage in the game as well. Anytime someone asks me what unit should they pull for damage, my instant response is Neuvillette. All you need is 3 Hydro-based reactions on him, one of which ideally being a shielder, and that's it. They don't even have to be good. You can bring Xinyan, Qiqi, and Ningguang just to achieve reactions and shield, and Neuvillette will still hard carry. If you get C1 on him, then you don't even need a shielder anymore. For a lot of units that get hyped up, you can make an argument for why they're overrated, but Neuvillette's strength unequivocally can't be overstated. Despite being a hyper carry whose team is primarily focused on his own damage, he's surprisingly versatile in teams. The main way to gear him up is of course a taser-centric team, as Electro Charge works famously with them, but to an extent he can also perform in bloom teams, freeze, and even vaporize if you're feeling it. When you're a hyper carry belonging to an element that is so universally applicable, you get the best of both worlds. Now, if I had to nitpick a weakness to be fair for everyone, he shares the same problem as Arlecchino, where he possesses no built-in protection from being staggered, requiring any C0 Neuvillette to be accompanied by shielder. As you know, even good shielders in this game don't contribute that much to DPS if at all, whereas healers can supplement your party's damage through reactions. Getting staggered out of a Hydro Pump can result in a considerable loss of damage. Granted, like I said before, you can cover that with C1 and then some. At C1, he has no weakness whatsoever. Hands down the best damage dealer in the game. Even at C0, his damage is so good you can more than afford to bring a shielder along. Hands down the best on-fielder in the game. Third unit on this list will be Xiao. This guy has been given tons of love in recent years, not just from the community but also Hoyo themselves. Xiao was one of Genshin's earliest hyper carries, if not the earliest. Sporting a unique playstyle based on plunging attacks, he takes a role quite uncharacteristic of the Animo element. His damage was always impressive even back then, but in light of Animo not having DPS reactions and the hyper carry niche as a whole taking a backseat in favor of reaction teams, his early career was pretty tough. The turns have tabled though. With the release of Vars on version 3, Xiao finally has a dedicated Animo support who supplies him with plenty of damage augmentation in lieu of reactions. At extreme levels of investment, Xiao can easily compete against the best of the best. Were just that, I would have kept him as honorable mention material, considering there are other carries of phenomenal damage ceilings that have a more relaxed playstyle. But following the advent of Xianyun in version 4.4, Xiao is officially one of the best carries in the game, and here's why. Thanks to Xianyun, Xiao is now able to comfortably slot in Farina, and while Farina's damage amplification will be of service to any team, if you're unable to use Baizhu Jin or Xianyun, it can get uncomfortable having her on your team unless you have C2 Farina. Xiao not only has no trouble fitting both of them, but he wants to have Xianyun on his team, as the Cloud Retainer magnifies his plunging attack damage to even greater heights. You can think of Xiao as Neuvillette with more steps. It takes more effort to get Xiao to absurd damage levels, but once you do, he can pretty much be used for any and every scenario you can think of. As far as I recall, there's no boss immune to Animo, and even if there is, there's no Animo shield, so you can have Farina or your non-Animo teammates take care of those units, while Xiao can destroy everyone else. Bane of All Evil is unique in that it's one of the few steroid buffs in Genshin that has an uptime exceeding 12 seconds. At a 15-second duration and 18-second cooldown, it effectively has permanent uptime since you can use those 3 seconds to swap out to your other party members. The thing holding him back was that Xiao generated 0 energy from his skill while in this state, forcing you to rely on either kills to charge energy or party members to support you. Furthermore, it wasn't until recently that we had supports with buffs that could last that long. For example, Bennett could only last 12 seconds. With Vars, Xinyun, and Farina, Xiao not only has 2 animal supports to supply him with all the energy he needs, but he also has damage buffs that last the full duration of his ultimate. And I'd pay money to find a boss or chamber that can survive 15 seconds against the pogo stick of death. This guy annihilates everything in the game with ease. All the same, he's a very specific hypercarry to build who needs very specific units on his team. Obviously, you can still play the original Xiao team with Bennett and Zhongli, but there's only a single team putting him in the upper echelon. Of course, every carry has an optimal team, it's not just him. But of all the units on this list, I'd argue he's the most party stringent. Getting C6 on a 4-star could potentially be more costly than C2 on a 5-star due to the absence of any guarantee of pulling them. Next unit will be Nilou. This choice might be divisive for some depending on what's considered a carry. Some might say that Nilou would be a more appropriate choice for a best teams video, not really best DPS or best carry. But if you think about it, the damage of Bountiful Course is because of her, so despite not being obligated to run point on her team, I do consider Nilou a DPS character. Nilou was broken since the day she came out, and until Hoyo decides to abandon all sense of balance and give us 4 more Neuvillettes, she will continue to be broken. Much of what makes her such a strong character is how disgustingly powerful her bloom cores are against clusters of enemies. Thanks to her A1 passive, bloom cores get empowered to explode in a larger radius and much more quickly, removing the need for you to add either Electro or Pyro to blow them up fast. Those bloom cores are reinforced even further by her A4 passive, increasing their damage by up to an additional 400%. The bloom reaction already has some of the highest elemental mastery scaling and base damage out of all reactions. Nilou can almost quintuple that, dealing monumental amounts of damage. It goes without saying her DPS compounds on fighting multiple opponents on account of each enemy spawning a bloom core, thus causing them to take damage from their own bloom core spawned plus the bloom cores of other enemies. As a result, Nilou has some of the best AoE clearing in the game. It is mildly inconvenient that you can't use animal units to group enemies and cores, but the effect radius is still good enough to cover a fairly wide radius. More importantly, her ease of use is accentuated by the fact that anyone in her party can spawn Bountiful Cores. Again, whether that makes her a support or damage dealer comes down to your point of view. Like Xiao, Nilou is fairly party restricted. You can only use a combination of Hydro and Dendro units for her team, non-negotiable, disqualifying her from capitalizing on supports of other elements. But in her defense, Hydro and Dendro are not only the 2 strongest elements in the game, but they have a fairly robust assortment of characters. Perhaps when the Dendro roster was still being developed, her elemental restriction would have been more detrimental, but now that's no longer the case. You have a decent selection of healers, drivers, damage supports, and of course, DPS units. Heck, you can even put Neuvillette and Nilou on the same team and watch the world burn. Or rather, I should say drown. Last but not least, Alhaitham. I neglected to mention him in last year's video and I will not make the mistake again. You might remember I said in Neuvillette section that there are only 2 on-field damage dealers that I would resolutely consider a must-pull. Alhaitham is the second one. He's by no means the same gigachat as Neuvillette. You could even dispute whether he's more of a main DPS or driver. As covered in my Why Everyone Plays episode on him, Alhaitham's strength doesn't stem from power, not entirely anyway. Rather, how seamlessly you can use him at almost no cost to uptime and efficiency. Alhaitham's virtue is that he works with anything and anyone. He can make efficient use of a wide variety of swords and a wide variety of artifacts. Best of all, he scales very well with all manner of substats, whereas others might have to be more specific with their builds. Going further, Alhaitham can join up with any character who can even remotely synergize with Dendro-based reactions. For all intents and purposes, he's equated to Nahida in pull value, and the 2 are emphatically encouraged to be used in tandem. It does help that he's really the only worthwhile choice for on-field Dendro, with his only competition being Tignati. Now, while his party and building Gnosticism is the main selling point, that in no way diminishes his personal capability. He does damage, a lot of damage, and in a similar fashion to Arlecchino and Neuvillette, he can swap out to other party members, then swap back in without having to wait for his skills to come off cooldown. One more thing is that his rotations, elaborate as they may be, are accommodating to any range of timings, all the way up to 12 seconds. Admittedly, in terms of raw power and coverage, he may not be quite on the same level as the first 3. Half his damage output involves Dendro reactions. Even so, just like the others on this list, there's no real circumstance where he's not an effective option, and it's extremely unlikely for him to lose his position in top 5 for quite a long time. There would have to be serious amounts of power creep for him to get knocked off, and even then, his sheer usability and versatility set a very high bar for that. That concludes my list for the top 5 strongest DPS characters in Genshin Impact as of version 4.6. My 2 honorable mentions will be Hu Tao and Navia. Though Arlecchino has officially dethroned the Wangshang director, Hu Tao is and will always be a stellar Pyro DPS. Matter of fact, if you go plunge Hu Tao, you can make a strong case for her still being top 5. As for Navia, though her persistent damage is nothing to write home about, her front-loaded damage is more than sufficient at speedrunning through everything in the game with enough investment. Just imagine if she was able to vaporize or melt. Incidentally, you may have noticed that DPS has been priced more highly than burst damage. That has more to do with consistency than actual strength. Burst damage is prone to many errors, such as what if the enemy team survives your burst damage, what do you do then? Or what if that burst doesn't critically strike, whereas DPS is a lot more forgiving. That being said, burst damage is still important, the faster you can kill stuff, the better. In any case, I'll remind you one last time that just because a unit is not present on this list does not mean they're bad. Genshin's DPS categories developed a lot over time, and by this point the game's difficulty has been far overshadowed by your means to complete it, so feel free to play whomever you wish, but for those looking to invest in a new team, any of these 5 are your best bet. If you guys enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other top 5/top 10 videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.